been 15 years since terrorists destroyed the World Trade Center and damaged the Pentagon, and the world really hasn't been quite the same place since. These world-changing events, these moments where American exceptionalism kind of gets punctured, and typically there's effects on the rest of the world from that. It seemed to happen about every 20 years or so. I mean, we had the World Trade Center in the 80s. There was the Challenger explosion. In the 60s, there was the assassination of JFK. In the 40s, the bombing of Pearl Harbor. In the 20s, the stock market crash. So the moments in life where people ask each other, "Where were you when you heard?" seem to happen about every 20 years or so. So a little bit of time before we get to the next one. I remember I wasn't even working at that time. I found out about it when the clock radio went off, not quite 10 in the morning, and normally Daniels and Webster would, have some joking stuff as they wrapped up their show and headed off to DC Day. And instead, I hear about how the World Trade Center has been hit and the Pentagon is on fire and all air traffic in the United States is being grounded. So that woke me up a bit quicker than normal, and I got up and brushed my teeth. And by the time I was downstairs, the first tower was already gone. I was ended up watching TV all day on that. I was out of college and not employed at that point, and parents both went to work, and I just sat there and had the TV on all day, trying to do other things to an extent. In fact, because I didn't need to learn to drive until I was a bit older, didn't have any need for it, didn't want to have to pay for the insurance for a car I wasn't really using, so I actually had a driving lesson that day. Around noon on September 11th, I was actually in a parking lot with the instructor and another driver practicing parallel parking, which sounds a little bit more surreal now than it did then, because not sure the reality of what was going on had completely sunk in at that point. And I watched the news coverage all day and sort of summarized it in 1 or 2 minutes when family got home, since I was watching and was able to sort of filter out a lot of the stuff. And yeah, it was a very long day. Last time I'd missed my ex-girlfriend because I just didn't miss her so much as I just didn't want to be alone. I sat in the house by myself like 9-10 hours just watching this footage and the news reports, and I was by myself, and I can get to you a little bit. This past summer, I got to the 9/11 Memorial for the first time. Some family had invited us to Manhattan and saw a number of plays on Broadway, and had a bit of extra time the one day, and the 9/11 Memorial was really the one thing there that I wanted to see. So we went, my wife and I, my mother-in-law went, and the rest of the family, the girls, had talked about seeing the memorial, but instead they want to go up to the top of the Freedom Tower and see the view from, go over a quarter of a mile up, and I don't blame them. So we went down, me and Kristen and mother-in-law, and it sneaks up on you when you're in there. You see the first couple of things, and there's news reports, sound clips playing, and it doesn't seem like a whole lot at first, but as you're down there for a while, it starts to build up and accumulate, and after a while, it kind of overwhelms you. You look at the individual things, and it's like, okay, I know this, remember this, and then you get down deeper, and you can see the actual footprints of the building, the girders of the original World Trade Center, and you see a piece of the transmitter tower on the top of the one tower is in there. And they have a fire truck from a crew that had responded, and I believe that was one where everyone was killed. And there's a room that has pictures of all of the victims, and it's floor to ceiling. It's like, 8-10 feet high, and it's like 15-20 pictures in a column, and it just lines the entire room. And it eventually it overwhelms you. I was a little bit annoyed that we ended up leaving a little bit earlier because the other people I was with were getting over, but I was too, so I really don't have any grounds to complain. It's not something that is like a hammer blow to the chest. It sneaks up on you. Being in there is powerful, and I do recommend that people go at some point and try to remember what it was like, try to understand, because we've reached a point where high school seniors, people graduating from high school this year, don't remember 9/11. If you're 18 now, you were 3 when it happened, and if you're 3, you probably don't have a whole lot of memory of it, and certainly don't understand the impact. So 9/11 for people who are leaving high school, entering college, is, like the Challenger, like Kennedy, it's just something in a history book. It's something you don't remember. And time marches on, and I find myself wondering, have we learned anything from this? From 9/11, from what happened? And I don't know how much we have learned. I mean, when it happened, President Bush's approval rating shot up to 90%, not because people approved of him or what had just happened, but because they wanted someone to believe in, and he was the man in the office that we all turned to on our country's darkest days, and this was a day so dark the entire planet paused. People were willing to come together in unprecedented ways. Doors were open. Enemies and allies alike were shocked by what had happened, and the door, however briefly, it was open. A great leader could have brought people together, found common ground, tried to work towards something better. Bush and his team immediately began the polarizing "you're either with us or you're against us" nonsense, the charm offensive that quickly alienated many of our closest allies. And the attack was masterminded out of Afghanistan, so we turned the bulk of our military might to Iraq and Saddam Hussein, because, remember the quote, "After all, this is the guy who tried to kill my dad at one time." So, at least we were going into Iraq for good national security reasons. And there was no plan beyond that. And the country was devastated, and thousands of lives were lost. Over 1 million by many estimates at this point. Over 1 million people have died in Iraq because of our invasion. And money was lost hand over fist, and Cheney's favorite war profiteers, Halliburton, made out well, among others. And we left behind a power vacuum that's destabilized the region probably for decades, and it helped lead to the rise of ISIS, who we're fighting now. And the opportunity was lost. And we later learned the rationale for war that we were given was based on wishful thinking and outright lies, and the supporters of the invasion still range from unapologetic to openly proud of this. And Saddam Hussein was captured and given a show trial and executed. And yeah, I suppose we're a little bit safer without him, but that doesn't justify what had happened. And now we're not really learning anything. We're doing the same thing, similar things in Syria, and we're still using the military solution when other options are available. And we don't seem interested in doing better. We accomplished most of what we set out to do militarily when we responded to 9/11. Saddam Hussein is gone. Osama bin Laden is gone. Taliban have lost most of their top members, and we've accomplished largely what we set out to do, and yet we don't feel any safer. We're still terrified that terrorists are going to kill us at any time in any way. We've become much more fearful of Muslims simply because we associate them with terrorism, which is completely unfair to tar the entire religion for the acts of a few terrorists, just like it would be unfair to tar all Christians for Timothy McVeigh and the Oklahoma City bombing, but we do that. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that none of what we've done goes to the source of terrorism. We haven't done anything to combat the causes of it. In America, we have more nationalistic pride, which is not really a good thing necessarily. It tends to be immune from reality. We think that we're better simply because who we are. We think we're better because of who we are and where we were born, rather than anything that we've actually done or stand for. It's kind of like religions or sports teams. There's no real superior or inferior one. It's just, this is what we believe in, so we're the best. And that's not a good thing because it's exempt from rational thought. You can't argue with nationalistic pride. You can't argue against it because it's not based on anything that's necessarily reasonable or rational. And so reason and rationality don't influence people who use this as a justification for their beliefs or for the actions they take because of them. Dick Cheney and his team have stated that he won't leave the country for fear of being arrested for war crimes, which I think is a pretty solid statement about how justified and warranted what America's response was. If the former Vice President of the United States is talking about fearing being arrested for war crimes, then he's done something very, very wrong. And we've done something very, very wrong as a country for supporting it. And in our ongoing efforts to win the hearts and minds of people in the Middle East, Bush started and Obama has drastically increased drone warfare. We don't seem to be making much progress with winning the hearts and minds of the people in the Middle East with this drone warfare. Maybe because going into foreign countries and crashing flying bombs into them, killing people, including innocent civilians, is not something that the people in that country find endearing. Who could have foreseen that, right? So we talk about never forgetting, and we will never forget, but tragically for some of us it appears that we're never going to learn anything from this either. We seem to be more interested in vengeance than in understanding, in hitting the people who hurt us rather than trying to prevent them from wanting to hurt us in the first place. We're not really doing anything to combat the causes of terrorism. We're just playing whack-a-mole with it. And we need to do better. Terrorism is not something that people do simply because they're evil. Terrorism is largely a last resort of people who see absolutely no other options, no way to improve their lives, no way to affect change. It's an act of desperation. And desperate people do dumb things, and we should be working to try to make people less desperate and less angry, because when 9/11 happened and a number of Americans were killed, we became angry. And so we attacked them, and we've killed a lot of them, and now they're angry at us. And so there are terrorists who are trying to get vengeance on us, just as we tried to get vengeance on them. And this is a cycle that is not going to end if nobody is willing to try to understand where terrorism comes from and try to prevent people from wanting to be terrorists in the first place. You don't win a war like this by fighting terrorists. You win a war like this by making people not want to be terrorists in the first place. And we don't seem to care about that. Nothing that we are doing seems to be geared toward that goal. And as long as that's the case, we're going to have perpetual war, which is great for the war profiteers, but not so good for anyone else. And we continue to look for the military solution for all circumstances. And it's a disaster, and it continues, and it's going to be a disaster, and it's never going to get better as long as it keeps going this way. 15 years since 9/11, untold thousands of people dead, millions of civilians in Iraq and other places in the Middle East, and the refugee crisis in Syria. And we continue to do the same thing we did before because it's been 15 years and we haven't learned a goddamn thing.